Hi, everybody. My name is Kerrie Bodendorf, and I'm here with Karen Safire. Welcome, Karen. And Karen, can you tell us where you're from and how you first heard about the melt method?
I'm from Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. It's just outside the city, about 30 minutes outside the city in Westchester. And I first heard about melt in, I think it was about 2010. I was taking another yoga teacher training. I'm a yoga teacher. And Edya was in my yoga teacher training.
Oh,
And at the studio, the studio, big, beautiful studio in New York City, set up with lots of melt rollers, like old school melt rollers, the ones that were the light blue, dark blue ones, not the newer ones.
yeah.
I guess they're not newer anymore. So it was very interesting. Edya talked a little bit about melt, and to me, I asked about it. But she would have these conversations with our teacher, the teacher of our training, which were interesting and piqued my interest because our teacher had one point of view, and then Edya had all this knowledge, like new science, living body model, which our teacher was, interestingly not that open to, I'll just say.
Mhm.
So that of course piqued my interest even more. Like I was like, okay, so what is this? But I didn't get to take class with Edya at that time. I just kept on with my regular old yoga teacher training, but this was in the back of my mind. And I started to develop hip discomfort. And I've been a dancer for many, many years, 30 years, professional dancer. And I stopped dancing actually in my late 30s because my hips were hurting me. So stopping dancing, doing more yoga helped. Then that didn't help anymore. So my hips started hurting me again. And I thought, well, what about this melt method? I was going to PT, that wasn't helping, nothing was really helping. So I, being a teacher, looked online and looked at Melt University and was like, so how do you learn this stuff? And so I see you have to do hand and foot training. And I'm like, wow, hand and foot training? Like, I don't want hand and foot. Like, I want to use those rollers. So, but I'm like, okay, hand and foot training. So I take the hand and foot training and I'm like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. That this ball is like doing all that. So that completely changed my life. Totally. I
Just the hand and foot.
Just the hand and foot. My hips
that.
felt, my hips were renewed.
Yeah.
Like they were renewed. They felt so much better. So I only used a large soft ball for like 3 years. I didn't use any other balls. I took it everywhere. In that time, I started teaching kids yoga over the summer. And then I got a really bad case of Achilles tendonitis with like a walnut in my Achilles tendon, plantar fasciitis, mess.
Yeah.
So I go back to my large soft ball again, and the walnut leaves my Achilles tendon. My plantar fasciitis completely clears up. I'm like, again, only foot, large soft ball. That's it.
Wow.
So I'm going on with my life, and my hips start hurting me again. And I'm like, I'm still melting my feet. I'm still melting my hands. I'm teaching all my clients, all my students, everybody has the ball kit. Everybody's melting their feet and hands. And my hips start hurting me again. And I'm like, maybe I should look up some more melts. So I go online, I find a teacher nearby. I go to a couple melt classes and I'm like, yeah, interesting, but I'm not in love. And so I'm like, that's kind of, I thought I would really like just dive in just like the hand and foot training. And so I look online again, Melt University, find level 1, sign up. You and Edya are my teachers. And like, it was a total game changer. So lower body compression, foot treatment, upper body compression, no pain, completely like erased. My back was starting to hurt me from my hips hurting me. It was
cascade, right? One thing hurts and that all hurts.
Exactly. Total pain cascade. Yes. So I'm like completely and totally hooked right then. And she piggybacks like level 1, level 2 right after each other sometimes, and tells everybody like, maybe you shouldn't do that. And, and I'm like, no way I'm doing that. So I do level 2, and level 2 like completely blows my mind again. Like all the upper body compression, like outer shoulder blade glide and shear, all chest glide and shear, the neuro core stuff. So my pelvic floor is also getting inhibited because of my hip discomfort and my low back pain. And at that time, I'm like waking up like 3 times a night to go pee, like really unhappy about it, sleep disrupted, not good. So I do level 2, I learned some more neuro strength, neuro core stuff. And that completely transforms, like no more getting up in the night to go pee, maybe once. I'm like, wow, my hips are feeling great. The first time for a long time, my hips are feeling great. I'm like, this is amazing. So then again, I'm all my classes, my yoga classes, I start then teaching these mini melt classes before all my yoga classes, which are like kind of, you know, they're like prep. They're like pre-yoga, like whatever we're going to work on. If we're going to do inversions and take a lot of weight on our hands, we'll do upper body stability. We'll do upper body compression. We'll do for sure always a lot of neuro core stuff. And same if we're going to do a bunch of standing practice, you know, which oftentimes we do. Hip stability, like now, it's become just my complete and total go-to. So lots of my students now have like a whole practice, a little melt before, and then we incorporate all the same things that we're using: shoulder stabilization, rotator cuff, a lot of glutes, hip stabilizers in our yoga practice. So we combine with language and with posture and with melt, prehabbing for yoga, and then in our yoga class. So it's amazing. It's awesome. Okay, so then I'm continuing on. I'm level 2 trained now. Everybody's doing it. All my clients have rollers, ball kits, my studio's all set up for it. And my hips start hurting me again. And I'm like, you know, yeah, bummer. This is a bummer. I continue on just kind of, you know, making it through. On the mat, I'm golden, right? On the mat, I'm golden. But once I start weight bearing, it's like, this is not feeling great. I'm not walking well. So I think I got to go back to Melt University. I do NeuroStrength 1 because it's NeuroStrength 1 at that time. And lo and behold, my left hip, I cannot repattern. I cannot make the neurological connections into my left hip. I can't get my glutes to fire properly. I cannot, and my shoulder, it was the whole left side. I couldn't get my left shoulder girdle also. Like I couldn't get my left rotator cuff. I couldn't get my left triceps. The whole left side impacted. So I'm like, my right side is like right on it, totally connected fantastically. So I'm thinking to myself, this is not good. This is weird. And I'm hobbling a little bit more, and my hip is hurting me, my left one a little bit more. So finally I go to an orthopedist. I go to physiatrist first, and he takes an x-ray. He comes into the room. I say, look, I just want you to know, I'm really not interested in surgical intervention. I really want to do a non-surgical, if at all possible. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I'm like, what do you mean? He says, well, first of all, you have hip dysplasia. I'm like, hip what? He said, yeah, you have a really small hip socket, and it covers any of your femoral head. And I'm surprised that you're walking around as well as you are.
Right.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. Yes. So I'm like, wow, you're kidding me. He says, you are bone on bone in both your hips. I'm like, well, my right hip is great. I don't feel anything. He's like, well, you can tell me that, and I can show you this.
Wow.
And he shows me the x-ray, and it's a little tiny socket and a femoral head and like zero space. Like they are kissing cousins right next to each other. So I'm like, okay, so no wonder. He goes, you need a total hip replacement. I'm like, what? No way. Yeah, you need a total hip replacement. So I'm completely shocked. Luckily, one of my clients, who husband is like the premier, a pioneer of hip replacement surgery at HSS. So I go to him, and he's like, yeah, the guy was right. You are bone on bone, but you don't need a hip replacement yet. I'm like, well, I'm limping around. He's like, I see that. He said, but let me just say, when we do a hip replacement, it's not the same. I'm like, well, that's good because my hip is killing me. He said, no. It's not like your bones. It's not going to be the same. And so I'd taken aback, right? I'm like, well, everybody I know who's had a hip replacement loves it, and like, it's amazing, and their life has changed. He's like, no, you go away, you wait. 3 months, 4 months, come back, and then we'll decide. Could go either way. He said, keep doing what you're doing. What you're doing is great, but my yoga practice is diminishing. I'm still trying neuro strength, right? I'm trying all my neuro strength one. I'm trying clam, side leg lift, still no luck on the left, still a lot of good connection on the right. So I go back, gimping around 3 more months. I go back, I get a total hip replacement, and 2 days, maybe, I guess I was in the hospital one night, home the next day. The day after that, I get out my soft ball, I've got my walker, and I'm melting my feet. And from then on, my hip is like amazing. My left hip is amazing. I don't feel like I have a prosthetic hip at all. I feel like I have a bionic hip. I feel like I have a hip that bends well for the first time in my life. It's incredible. So then I'm rehabbing. I'm super atrophied on my left side. My hamstring isn't firing. My glute isn't firing. And I can get myself to power up my left side. I'm doing well, but there's certain things that are just not quite working. My back, I can get it to, you know, again, it gets nice and hydrated, feeling great, but doesn't really stay. So I think I got to go back to Melt University. So by then she switched everything. It's level 5. Just finished level 5, and it's the complete and total game changer. That has like brought my body back online in a way I haven't felt. I mean, I'm telling you, it feels like it must be 30 years ago. Super strong, grounded, better balance, freer movement, just so much better. And my clients also, I have a client I've had for 30 years now, 30 years. Started with her as a personal trainer. And I took her over from somebody, and like monthly, she was going to the PT because her back was out. And I was like, well, that's not great. So I was a personal trainer at the time. We were stretching her and doing all these things, got her better, but still, so maybe it was like every 6 months she'd have to go to the PT. Hand and foot, got her doing the foot treatment, and the hand too, because she has some arthritis in her fingers. Completely then now stopped going to the physical therapist at all, never had to go. Now neuro strength, now her back 100% doesn't even feel, every session, how's your back? Great, nothing really to speak of. You know, if she bends down in a weird way or something tweaks in a weird way, she'll like, kind of tweaked it out today. We do a melt, she's like golden. It's amazing. And I have many stories like that of many of my clients, terrible neck arthritis, completely, really super limited range of motion, increasing range of motion, decreasing pain. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm a meltophile. I feel also like I have something now for the rest of my life, for me, for my clients, for my students. I'm teaching only online now because of COVID. So I went online right at the beginning of the pandemic, teaching only online. My studio is tiny, so we're soon to be all vaccinated, my family and myself. And so I think once I'm all vaccinated, I'll be able to do private in my studio in Hastings again. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to do about classes. Have you ever melted on the grass?
Yeah, I know. Well, if you do like a rest assess on the grass, how do you know if it's your body that's a little bit off or the ground is a little bit off? But I think there are some instructors that do teach outside. Yeah. People are getting creative with it, you know. And if you do if you feel different after you come back after doing a sequence, then maybe it's a good thing to do. Well, I love your melt story, Karen. That was a saga. I mean, it really is amazing how you were able to get your bone on bone hips to feel fine for really long periods at a time. And you weren't even you were shocked to learn that's what was going on. So no wonder why your hip pains kept coming back. But melt can kind of, it can stretch out the time or kind of push back the time for a replacement. But, I've heard Sue say this to many melt instructors, if you need a replacement, if you're too far gone and there's bone on bone, you just need a replacement. But if you are melting right up until, and then melting as soon as you can after the surgery, it will really help kind of juice up that tissue And I
Yep.
know that some surgeons, when they get into people who have been melting pretty regularly, they can't believe how easy the tissue is to work with. It's just supple and juicy. So it will help prepare your body for surgery. In some cases, it can certainly help avoid surgery for short or long periods of time. And then it can also help you heal after surgery. So I thank you so much for sharing your story. So Karen, you did just mention that you do teach classes online. And would you like to talk about your class schedule briefly?
Sure, yeah. So I teach weekly classes, melt and yoga, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Sunday's only melt, just strictly melt. And it's a neurostrength class, or neurostrength, because I am now leaning much more towards strengthening. It was a performance class where I was kind of doing some neuro and a lot of hydration, but now I've really pushed it over. My students are ready for it, and I feel like that's really helping. So yeah, during the week they're more like prep for yoga, but I have a lot of melters that just come for my weekly 40 minutes. And yeah, it's like a kind of, get in, get out, and really sets you up for the day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Karen. And we will put all of Karen's contact information in the description section of this video. And if you want to share your melt story with me, I will also put my contact information in the description of the video. Karen, thank you so much for joining me, and happy melting, everybody.
Thank you, Kerrie, so
Thank
much. Happy
you.
melting.